Well, now we can go into details of the dialectic materialism. Uh, Basically, I mean, I believe there's a reading of Engels which describes it in more detail in your readings. And there's also a reading which is actually applies it to the society. But Marx and Engels think that basically for any social, biological, or physical system, the basic process is still true. So any social, biological, and physical system contains contradictions. Well, in case of Hegel, the contradictions were the aspects of the idea system which were opposing each other. So it makes it difficult. The system of ideas exists as a system because I mean, different parts of the system are contain opposing values or opposing or certain aspects that are kind of decreasing the value or outcome of the other idea. So one idea might be increasing, one process might be increasing the freedom, the other one might be decreasing the freedom. So both the processes described by this idea system might be actually opposing each other. So these contradictions make the idea system um, well, kind of create weaknesses of the idea system, and at least for some people, it might be think that this idea system has some people might think as a result of these contradictions, the idea system has weaknesses, and a better system which might cure these weaknesses of the idea system can be created. In case of our material systems, the contradictions are existing in the material world, and these contradictions have potential to destroy the existing system. Uh, the main example I can give, of course, is a very simple material system. The systems Marx and Engels describe are much more complex, like a forest as a physical system, or a planetary system around a star as a material system, as a physical system. But you might think of a balloon, and the air pressure within the balloon potentially can extend the balloon, and as time it expands, the balloon up to a certain point. While this expansion continues, can resist the tension created by the expansion. As it expands, the balloon surface becomes more tense, but up to a certain point, it can resist this tension. But this extension, as a result of air pressure, potentially can destroy the balloon, because it might come to a point when the balloon might not anymore resist this tension, and at that time, balloon might just explode. Uh, at normal times, if a system is can survive, can exist, uh, these contradictions that can potentially destroy the system are contained. In case of balloon, for example, this inner air pressure is contained or contained by the outside air pressure, the air pressure of the atmosphere. As a result of balloon surface is subject of two different pressures from two different sides, which prevent further expansion of the balloon and let it survive. So there are contradictions. Those contradictions are contained. As a result, the system survives. But if system develops, and especially if the system becomes more complex, which happens for many macro biological, physical, and social systems, mostly, I mean, if you look to macro level, of course, in micro level, you might see developments in the other direction. But at macro level, the systems are becoming mostly more complex. And as they become more complex, new elements are added to each other, they combine. The contradictions become more and more difficult to contain, because they become also more complex. They become also certain elements that contain them make it weaker, and there are more contradictions might be added to it, and there will be a point when existing system, and also I mean the existing system has cannot change the structures that are containing the contradictions, but contradictions as the system becomes more complex, more sophisticated, and at some point the existing structure will be too weak to contain this more complex and more stronger contradiction. And at that point, well, the existing system will be destroyed, or totally or partially, and a new and better system is created, which can contain which has new contradictions, but is more successful in containing these contradictions. Now, when we turn to the analysis of the analysis of history done by Marx and Engels, and analysis of human societies, and that analysis is specifically called historical materialism. I mean, in a way, dialectic materialism applied to history, basically. And there, Marx and Engels famously claim that history of the humanity is nothing but the struggle of different social classes. So, for them, basically, especially after the civilization is created, the social classes are creating the primary contradictions of the social systems. Why? Because these social classes are different groups in the society with different interests, and these different interests ultimately have potential to destroy the whole system. Because I mean, one group has completely different interests, even maybe values, even maybe priorities than the other. And that difference, that division is the most strong inner element that can destroy the society. And the success of the societies or social systems usually are created by their power, by their ability to contain this major contradiction, which is the class struggle. And class struggle is a potential element that can destroy the system. So in a way, I mean, the most important element of the history in that sense is the ability or inability of societies to contain class struggle, and everything kind of revolves around this ability. So class struggle is kind of the, you might say, the key element. And in order to express this in a more normative way, you can say history of humanity is nothing but the class struggle of the people, because everything else is just, you might think, an extension of this class struggle. Every other aspect of history is an extension of this class struggle. So, now, this is the end of the dialectic materialism. I will talk a little bit on the another aspect of Marxian philosophy, which is holism and isolationism, which is actually in this particular aspect, actually, Marx and Engels describe two ways of studying the science, and these are their descriptions, and they criticize the science by claiming they are usually choosing one of them, isolationism, while the other, holism, has benefits, special benefits that especially when you study society, actually, moving away from isolationism and to the holism is a better way to study societies according to them, and they express that. So isolationism is basically this. For example, if you study atom or if you study preferences of individuals, you just isolate them and you try to look to that element independent of everything else in the nature and try to find this independent characteristics of this element. And then after you find these individual elements, when you try to understand the system, you use this independent characteristics of the elements you have found to find or describe how these elements interact with each other. For example, in the economics, basically in introductory classes, consumers are studied as independent from every influence around them, and we define the general characteristics of the consumers independent of everything else in the world, and then characteristics of the companies independent of everything else in the world, and then try to use these individual characteristics to describe how market with many consumers and many producers act or function. Well, according to Marx and Engels, basically, this is not a proper way, and actually, even when you are focusing on individual elements, you should never isolate them. You should always take into account the world around them is shaping them, and the fact that world around them is shaping them might be important because many characteristics of these basically elements might be actually as a result of the world around them, and as world around them change, maybe as a result of interaction between those elements, the characteristics of those elements might also change. So basically, we need to take into account the world around the elements we study when we study any kind of agent, any kind of entity. For example, if we study individuals, individual buyers and individual companies or producers, basically the characteristics of those characteristics or choices of those or preferences of those producers and consumers may in some cases depend on the overall characteristics of the market. So market itself might be shaping back the producers and consumers. And without taking that into account, when we describe the market that is formed as a result of the preferences of those agents, I mean producers and consumers, we might not be able to see the feedback loop, I mean the way the market itself affects back the consumers and the producers, and we might actually not find the ultimate results, the actual outcome of the market, because we don't see this outside effect. Of course, we can never see that all effects, all, let's say, factors that exist in the world that in a way shape the characteristics of the, let's say, people or the atoms, the things we study. But we should always take into account that the fact that the world around what we study shapes whatever we are studying, and we should always ask, I mean, how this let's say effect of word on what is the effect of word on the thing we study, and whether it is important in changing characteristics of the of what we study.